All right, folks, I got to introduce you to a young man that if you're in the horseshoeing world, you probably already know, but Cody Gregory, he's my son, fellow of the Worshipful Company of Farriers with honors. It's taken a while for us to get enough time, even though we live close to each other, to sit down. And we had a really great conversation about what it takes to get to where he is, raising kids, how to be a parent, all the kind of cool stuff that I think you're really going to enjoy watching. So thank you very much for being a part of this, and we are cleared for takeoff. Long time coming.
Has been.
Yes. So everybody, I am sitting here with one of the people I know better than anybody, one of my best friends and my son and an inspiration and a well-known figure in the farrier industry. Thank you. Thank you.
How exciting is this?
Yeah. Well, we've been talking about doing this for a long time.
But we really wanted to do it until we got done with that trip in England last year.
Yep. Yeah. So that was the deal. I said, well, we should do it after we get home from Calgary. But then things got busy, and I said, oh, you know what? We will do it when you're done in England on the way home. Well, that didn't happen. It was a very busy time. Now that my situation has evolved a little bit as far as this all goes, it's perfect timing.
Yeah, and your skill set at this is improving tremendously.
I don't know about that. You guys can be the judge, but but I've been trying.
That's the Gregory task for you right now is chasing podcast.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we got to talk about going full Gregory. So everybody, welcome to Final Approach with Chris Gregory, and I am with Cody Gregory, FWCF with honors. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And folks, I thank you so much for sitting down with me for a little bit as we explore this young man's history, life path, and kind of figure out how he got to where he is. So I guess briefly, we should start. Do you remember making your first shoe?
I do.
As a 4-year-old, you remember that?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, and we still got the shoe.
We still have the shoe. I remember the Shut Up and Hit It class in Oklahoma.
Okay.
And I'd been practicing all year to build the shoe by myself. Right. And we got down there, and they were like, no, you get a striker, and they're holding the tongs. I'm like, no, that's not what we've been practicing for. But that was, how many memories do we have of great experiences like that?
Yeah, we have a lot of them over the anvil for sure.
Yeah.
And so that was the first buckle you won, right?
Yeah. It's Reggie Kester. Did he make it?
Yep. Yeah. And you were probably what, 5 or 6?
6, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so growing up in horseshoeing schools in an unusual situation because you got to work on horses that were meant for students to learn on. And so, do you remember shoeing your first horse?
I do. Yeah, a little pony at Kelly LaPrise's.
Yeah, 46-year-old.
Yeah, that horse was older than dirt.
Yeah. And, do you remember how long it took you?
Oh, all day.
All day.
Yeah, all day. It was one of those, you have moments of where I remember getting entirely frustrated with the fit. And I think you were either busy or being a good father, but you made me struggle through it. And I remember the frustration, and that was a big turning point in my own memories anytime I'm working through something of, yes, this is a time you can work through a thing and succeed at it.
So 8-year-old memory, huh?
Yeah.
I'll be dang. All right, and so then you got your journeyman at 15, and that was quite a path, huh?
There's a lot of blessings that happen in our life, right? So you look at buying this farm, and I guess I must have been about 8 when we bought this farm, huh?
See, we bought it in April of 2000, and you were born in December 91, so yeah.
Yeah, so I remember getting here, and this was like where you got turned loose. I knew this place up and down. I'd climb the hills. You turned me out for like whatever time, and I just expect to be back at dark, head out with my BB gun doing terrible things to any bird that flew.
Yeah.
Different.
No cell phone.
No cell phone.
Yep.
Yeah. It was just a
different time.
Different age. So that had been about then, and did our first pony. Where were we going with that?
Well, just, how you became a journeyman.
Oh, yeah.
And,
yeah, so we did that.
So your trail took you through a few places to become a journeyman.
Yeah. I guess part of where I was going with that, talking about moving to the farm, a big part of that, being able to become a journeyman, was not letting school get in the way of my education.
Yes.
And we were, every year we were at the horseshoeing school, we would get the message or the letter from school saying, hey, your children missed 2 more days, we're going to hold them back. And, we'd go to South Africa, and they give us a stack of schoolwork, and we'd get it done on the plane or whatever. And then, those experiences that we had that
you guys got to see some things.
Well, yeah, like the 12-year-old me going to South Africa and seeing the culture and how they live and going on that horseback safari and that entire experience, you know. So that would never be able to recreate in school.
Oh, no. Yeah, yeah.
And so moving to the farm was a big turning point, because when we moved here, we ended up starting to homeschool. And, you know,
Yep.
that schedule, being able to practice for, when we were rodeoing, I'd practice for 4 or 5 hours a day.
Yeah, because schoolwork is like an hour, hour and a half.
Yeah, we'd spend 2 hours a day, a couple
Yep.
days a week. And then, you know, I would literally practice 3 hours a day. I'd rope a dummy 200 times a day on a standard day. Like,
Yep.
that was just SOP.
And make shoes and trim feet. And
Yeah, as we got a little bit older, 14, 15, start chasing the journeyman. If we hadn't have done this,
right.
that would have never been feasible, you know.
Yep.
And
Yeah, I think it would be very hard for a young person to go to regular school and live in a family that doesn't have a horseshoeing school, or at least access to a lot of horses that can be done in any manner.
yeah,
And then get to journeyman. So the other journeyman also came through here. The other young journeyman
Yep.
has come through here, Javin Kropf, and he got it at 15, but he was Amish Mennonite, so he's done with school at eighth grade, right?
yep.
Yeah, so at 13 he came to horseshoeing school, and then he became a journeyman. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, it's incredibly cool to be part of that journey. And, well, he did awesome. He worked hard. He deserved it and earned it.
So you got your AW at 19.
Yep.
Yeah, what was that like?
I remember I passed the practical when I was 17, and then I had to work a little bit harder for the written.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a pretty incredible experience. I remember getting done with it. And, you know, I've always had a thing. When I was rodeoing, I had rodeos. We'd practice hours a day. Whenever I was competing, and if I missed 2 weeks, I missed 14 days of practice, including the days that I traveled, was a lot
Right.
when I was really competing. Same thing throughout that time of getting ready for the associate. Like, it's what you did.
Right.
And yeah, it was a pretty memorable experience. I thought, you know what, I'll sit back and there's a lot of people my age that don't really have goals. I guess I'll try this for a minute. Worst 2 months ever. Like,
So we call it the full Gregory, and you want to explain what the full Gregory is? Or?
yeah, the full Gregory is just you attack something with the entirety of your might, or
Good way of putting it.
your whatever is else around you, you let burn down, and you attack the thing that's important to you.
Yep. So with my dad, it became ranching and grass, and for a decade, you couldn't have a conversation with him that didn't include the height of the grass, the depth of
Can
his
you
roots.
yet?
Yes. Yeah. So now we can talk about cows. And my grandfather was the same. My grandfather, my dad's dad, he also would have his focuses, and
Yeah, he only held like 3 patents, right?
yeah, something like that. Yeah, he was a pretty amazing guy. And then throughout your youth, my thing was horseshoeing and horseshoeing education.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you decided to start a tool company. And so what I remember, so you moved out of here when you were 18 because you'd already bought your farm.
Mm-hmm.
You moved into a very decrepit house.
Yeah, it's like camping with a roof.
Yeah.
It was, you know, for a bachelor that wanted to make poor decisions, it was a great place. You know, like if a hole got put in the wall, well, we're tearing it down and whatever.
Yeah. Well, you sure had a lot of mice for roommates.
Yeah.
That place, I remember that a lot. But then whenever you decided to start a tool company, you went and bought a mill before you knew how to use a mill.
Well, I mean, I knew how to manual mill. So
That's right. You had a Bridgeport, right?
I had a Bridgeport, and yeah, you guys set me up really good. I don't know, you guys bought a machine shop that
Right.
had a bunch
all
of
the
manual
old
equipment. Yeah. And so my first kind of adventure into CAD was the plasma cam, learning to draw on that.
Right. That came with that machine shop, didn't
They
it?
came with that machine shop.
Right. I remember
which
that. Okay.
There was no education. It was
Right.
just me turning the computer on and just, well, that didn't work. And just, the number of hours, perseverance, right? Perseverance.
Full Gregory?
Full Gregory. I had to argue with that thing and just continue to pick away at it. So manual machining, there's a lot of different to CNC, right? Like it's you kind of know some of the general basics. The local high school, even though I was homeschooled and was done with school, they were kind enough to let me take, I guess it was probably a shoeing cycle, take me a course at the local high school on just manual milling. So I had that, and then I bought a CNC mill, and yeah, it was a 1997 Kuma. and it had a 30 kilobytes of memory running floppy drives. Now, 30 kilobytes is like, it is such a small memory.
It's like your name, isn't it?
Yeah, it's terribly small. It's terribly small.
But on a massive machine.
Oh yeah, massive. Like, yeah. Wait, you were you there when we got it with the crane?
Yes, so we took it out with the crane, but you had misplaced kilograms for.
Well, no, that was when we moved it to the new shop.
Oh, okay.
So when I first got it, we built the walls.
I helped build the walls.
Yeah,
no roof.
No roof, and then we picked it up with the crane, set it inside there, and I had like 10 inches all the way around.
Right. Yeah.
I built a huge room.
Yeah, that shop was you couldn't pass each other between the shop and the wall, and the machine.
Yeah, you just don't know what you don't know at the time,
Right.
right? And you do it as you can afford it, right?
Sure.
And so
I know all about that.
yeah, so between buying the software and that machine and building the room, I had right at 30 grand into everything, into tooling and all of it. I didn't know when you buy software that they still expect you to rent it every year and do a maintenance on it. So yeah, software is quite the learning experience too.
Yep.
Anyway, at the time I was running Mastercam and it didn't have a very good post, but I didn't know how to turn the machine on. I didn't have any education on it, but I had this stack of manuals. I don't know, just a big old stack.
It sounds even with your chair, didn't it?
Yeah, it was just terrible. Yeah, so yeah, I was actually sitting in a lawn chair on my porch is where I did most of my reading for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the time, I thought I could still drink caffeine and tea in the morning without my heart racing, so I would have myself a warm drink. Now I pretty well drink water on a regular basis. Anyway, yeah, I'd wake up and, I felt like I had to get this going, right? Because you spent the money on it, you're put this effort in, and so I gave me the perseverance to wake up at 4 a.m. and start reading my manuals, and that really changed a lot about where I was going. It's interesting to think a book by Peak by Anders Ericsson is Anders
Ericsson.
Anders Ericsson. That's a really interesting book in talking about how malleable a person's brain is.
Oh yeah.
And I think about what I've done to my brain. When I was young, everything was a really fine motor skill. From learning to rope and ride bulls, and then I went straight into competing heavily, and studied for my associate. But really, a lot of what I did was I'd stay up till 2 a.m. Midnight was an early night for me. Mm-hmm. That's what I did. You just practice till you couldn't, and then go to bed and wake up as late as you could. It took me 7 minutes from the time that I woke up to the time I got in the truck. And
you got that from your mom?
Yes, yeah. But what I found was my brain was malleable, and I can. It's a tool that I can bend to my will.
Okay.
And whenever I started to go down this more intellectual side of my brain, not that forging wasn't intellectual, you'd always be solving problems, but there's quite a bit of art to it. So I find during that period of when I was artistic, I really enjoyed working at night and late. But then I started doing a lot of reading and studying, and when I started that, I found my early mornings, and I found myself waking up earlier, and it really felt my brain be formed to what I want it to be. And
so you kind of feel like the forging or rope of the dummy or any of that stuff you were better at in the PM, mm-hmm. and then for any intellectual pursuit, the AM was better for you.
Yeah, and I can find though my sleep pattern is still affected by what I do in my brain.
Okay.
So if I'm doing a lot of intellectual reading, I find waking up early easy.
Okay.
And I find that if I end up doing much artistic stuff, that I want to stay up later and sleep in a little later.
Okay. So you and I have a lot in common, but we also have this one major difference that at least I see, in that I see the world from a little bit different angle than you do. And so the same thing with problems. I solve a problem from a different angle than you do, which for our students is a huge gift, because the students that are very mathematical and want to know the technical fraction of how to measure a foot for a shoe, you're their man. If they want to look at a foot and say, it looks like 11 and a half inches, then I'm the guy, because I have a very artistic, I guess, mm-hmm. and maybe a language-based skill set, mm-hmm. where you have a very mathematical skill set.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm even that mathematical, but the biggest thing I know about myself, that I know for me to learn something, I want to understand why. So whenever I see a problem, I I really need to understand the what and the way, where, all of it. So anatomy, for instance, when you look at anatomy and you look at a bone, I found it very difficult to just remember. Rote memorization is terrible. Like, do you remember your airspaces?
Sure.
So if you're a pilot, you have a lot to learn, and one of the things inside of that is the airspaces, and the airspaces it's just pure rote memorization.
And it should be simple, but it's not.
But it's not intuitive. It's not.
No, it's not intuitive.
It's not intuitive, and it's rote memorization.
Yep.
But if whenever I look at anatomy and the intelligent design of a horse, and I see, okay, this muscle is attached here, and whenever it pulls on this tendon, it's going to cause effect A, B, C, right? Like I can see that thing. I can picture how that animal's moving and what that muscle's function is, and all of those things in my mind. Okay. But once I figured out the why and I understood the position and all of that, then I can draw that three-dimensional picture in my mind, and it makes it so that I can remember the name of those parts of the bones.
So whenever you're thinking about this and trying to do a lesson, or you're even looking at a horse, do you have an anatomy diagram in your brain, or do you have a?
I have the muscles on a dissection because I've done over 44 horse dissections now.
Okay, so you have that plays in your head.
Yep.
And you can say, well, there's my superficial flexor muscle.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I very much have a picture.
And is your picture in color or black and white?
It's color.
Okay. And do you dream in color or black and white?
Color. Yeah.
All right.
I can have very vivid, but also, if you remember when I was young, a big thing that you had us read was the mental edge.
Oh yeah, I used to coach the mental game hard for you guys.
Yeah. But the mental edge, one thing it really teaches is the visualization.
Yep.
So that's a skill set that was well practiced by the time I was not very old at all. I had, I can still taste the rosin on my mouthpiece,
Yeah. So for the folks that are watching, there are some books that are, very important for people. And so the one you recommend, the one you mentioned earlier, Peak by Anders Ericsson, he's the guy that kind of comes up with the 10,000 hour rule that Malcolm Gladwell got famous for making public. But as Anders says in that book, it's not exactly as Malcolm said it, because it's not 10,000 hours of just doing a thing. It's 10,000 hours of doing a thing well with focus, right?
Yes.
And then the mental edge is about how to compete, mainly compete, and how to help yourself get there from a mental perspective. Because, in the horseshoeing contest, man, you get to the top level, and really, all 40 of those guys can make the shoes. All 40 of those guys can do a beautiful job on the foot. But the one that either makes the least mistakes or handles the mistakes the best without having a breakdown and is able to fix those mistakes, that mental capacity or mental game is what really wins it.
So talking about my journey through my associate, one of the trips, so you provided some incredible opportunities for me. So I was 17, I spent 5 weeks in New York, and then that same year I spent 5 weeks in England.
Yep.
And
with guys like Jonathan Nunn, Grant Moon, Dallas Morgan.
Yeah. So the English trip, I had Grant Moon, went to Billy Crothers, Nigel Brown, went to Jim Blurton's. They had their first Welsh team trials. So it's always been a buddy handshake to pick the Welsh team, right? Like, well, there's not that many Welsh, one. But then you had the Welsh team being, Grant, Billy, Andrew Martin,
Jim.
like Jim. The team was a pretty solid team, so you would never need to do a team trial. But they were trying to kind of get that going. So I went to the very first team trials, and watching them compete at Stoneleigh, one thing that was a big turning point in my forging career, my competitive career, I would watch Billy, and he would make a terrible mistake. I'm like, well, his go's done. And then when he was done, he never once looked back, never once seen the mistake as a problem, and just solved it immediately. And that life skill set, again, going back to that mental edge, the mental edge talks about, self-fulfilling prophecies, the difference between when you're driving down the road, don't cross the line and keep it between the lines. There's a vast difference between that. And if you can really absorb that statement where you never see a negative, and you never allow yourself to say, this is not something I can succeed at. It is, what am I going to do to complete it?
Yep. Well, once your mind says it's over,
it's over.
It's over.
Well, how many runs have you and I have seen that happens?
So for students, final horses, and especially in the last decade, has become more and more of a problem, where a little bit of a problem happens in the early part of a go, and it's over. That person
Yeah.
cannot recover from that. Yeah.
But it's cancerous. Like if that thought gets into someone's mind ever, like in everyday life, it's a terrible thing for them.
Yes.
And you can see the people that because when you're under stress and you're in the middle of a go, that's when you see if you have that personality.
Mm-hmm.
And just absolutely always have to have a solution.
Yep.
And that's, I think, one of my real skill sets is I always have a solution. I don't really, when I'm practicing, I don't ever leave a practice and go, well, that was a terrible practice. I see people getting frustrated when they're forging.
Mm-hmm.
Or doing whatever it is, but the only reason to be frustrated is if you don't have a plan to do better.
Right. So even if you make a horrible shoe, you take from that what you have to make a better shoe next time.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, there's no failure in that. You know, it's a Thomas Edison quote. I've never failed, but I know 10,000 ways to not that won't work.
Right.
And you have this idea that you have a certain number of steps you have to make. So let's say that I have a goal to get somewhere. You know, the one I tell the Horseshoeing school students is if we're standing at the school and I tell you have to walk to McDonald's, and there's no getting picked up, you're walking this distance. There's a certain number of strides you have to take. Some of them harder, some of them easier, but every one of those strides you have to complete to get to McDonald's.
Yep.
Like it's, and sometimes that stride feels like you're taking a stride backwards, but it's still a stride you had to take. There's this finite number of strides to get to where you're going to get. If you want to make it more difficult and, you know, start not having that positive that I am going to solve this, you're going to be taking a lot of short strides up steeper hills, but those strides will get you to where you're getting.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm thinking this year the word can't is going to come with push-ups.
Well, it sure came with spankings when I was a boy.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we can spank our students, but maybe, I don't know. But I you know, because that seems to have become a much bigger problem in the last few years. So I was talking to Mom about it with the class coming in. So class coming in, you guys may be here by the time this airs, but if you do say can't, it's going to be 10 push-ups immediately, wherever we are. And then we just make that a rule. They already got to do push-ups that they cuss.
Yeah.
But yeah, we gotta kind of change some minds on that perspective.
Sit back and you think about how you're going to do it better. That's what you do, right? That's the full Gregory is you put the full weight of whatever it is you're doing into it.
Well, and the self-fulfilling prophecy really is if you believe you can, you can. And if you believe you can't, you can't.
Yep.
You know, and and we've seen it happen time. Dante Diego, he's one of my favorite stories. You know, Dante came to school and really charismatic young man and funny, but not extremely hard worker. You know, I mean, not hard worker, but he wouldn't shine as like our hardest worker.
Yeah.
But he passed his midterm horse like his first try. And if you would have looked at him amongst the class, you wouldn't have expected that. But he just absolutely believed. Every time he did a knife stroke, it was perfect. And every time he did a wrap stroke, it was perfect. No matter what he ended up with, he believed it was perfect. And he believed in himself so much that it was amazing.
Yeah, the roughy mentality I haven't been bucked off until 2 weeks afterwards, and you don't have enough money to enter the next rodeo.
Right. It is a real roughy attitude.
Yeah.
Even though he's a team roper, he kind of had a roughy attitude. Yeah. Now, you got married about, 12 years ago now?
Yeah,
Or 13?
2013.
Man, that's kind of hard to believe.
Isn't
and
it?
You're raising your kids very thoughtfully. What's your thoughts on parenting?
So there's a book called 7 Habits for Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey, and one of the rules is to I'm gonna misquote it, but it's to have the end game in mind. And if I sit back and I think about where I want my children to be, what kind of adult do I want them to be, it really changes my perspective on what opportunities and situations I put them in. It's pretty easy to just say, hey, you know, I'm mad at you, you didn't clean your room. I'm mad at you, I didn't clean your room. But really, they need to know the skill set. So instead of getting on them, you take a second and you go, okay, I want you to understand why we do these things. This is how we're going to do the things, and we're going to stop and we're going to educate on this. And so because you know what that end goal in mind is, it changes how you approach situations like that.
So you know my story about Gerald Peachy, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'll just share it with you guys real quick. Gerald, he was one of 10 in a logging company, right?
Yep.
So his mom and dad were loggers, and he was one of 10. I think he's number 10.
Yep.
Number 10 of this homeschooled family. And he came to school at 16 from Canada. And I mean, he just worked circles around the other students. He was a real phenomenon. And so I was talking to his dad, and I said, boy, Mr. Peachy, you raised one heck of a kid. He says, I beg your pardon, Mr. Gregory. I never intend to raise a kid. I intend to raise a man.
Yep.
And that's what you're talking about.
Yep.
Instead of just solving the problem right now by cleaning the room for them or giving them a timeout or something, you're thinking about, how do I turn my daughter into a productive member of society with some skill sets?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The idea of older style vaccines is you give a very small part of the disease or the virus or whatever it is at the correct timing so that the body can have the ability to fight that problem. So I don't think sheltering is really what we're trying to do. But if we can apply the correct amount of the disease at the correct time, then we give them the knowledge and the skill set to handle that when they're an adult.
Okay.
And so we try to do that. We're not trying to hide them from technology, but at the same time, we try to make sure they understand when and why and how to use it. And so,
well, good parenting is really a vaccination for prison, right?
yeah.
Keeps you out of.
But we are trying to do that, but we do limit that kind of technology. You know, we were at a banquet this weekend, and someone I didn't expect, their child, we walked up and talked to them, and never looked up from their phone. And that was a pretty shocking experience for me. You know, both our girls walked over at separate times to say hello to this little girl, and she
Never looked up.
never looked up, sat there next to her grandpa and
Yeah.
stayed on whatever it was she was doing. And so I think that's probably one of the things that they're going to have to struggle with to understand, you know, what's the correct amount? How do we do this? So we're working pretty hard at making sure that they have that skill set. You know, I guess we won't know if we succeed at that until they're married and adult and have children, but
Yes.
we'll do the best we can.
Yeah. And so you're homeschooling, and your wife's really diligent about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how's that coming?
I don't know, I'm really proud of our girls. You talk to any grandparent, and you're going to have the same experience. So, you know,
No, you're unbelievable. Very smart, very
Yeah.
talented.
So Marcy, you know, she'll sit there and talk philosophy with you if you want, but she's reading any book she wants. She just picks up and reads. Last I knew, she was a good year plus ahead of school.
Okay.
And Heidi's in the same position. So she's 6, and I think she's doing second grade work, second grade math.
Do you know what they want to be when they grow up?
No, but I want to provide them the tools to succeed at whatever that is.
Sure.
And give them the undaunted determination to succeed at whatever that is. And, you know, being homeschooled, one of the biggest things I learned was that I can learn whatever I want. It was never, because more or less you're handed a book, or at the time we were on a computer, we were handed the computer and we were expected to just learn it. And there's a lot of struggle that comes with that, like how to learn that, how to do this thing. But now know anything I want is behind the paywall of a book. I just have to put the effort in, and I can have whatever knowledge I want.
Even if it's a meal with 30 kilobytes of memory, huh?
Yeah, it really is. Like, you can sit down. That's where your brain is malleable, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And it really is a tool you can bend to your will.
Yeah. So where are you headed next with your tool company?
I don't know that I want to pigeonhole myself into.
Okay. You don't want to have that on tape, huh?
Yeah. What is, you're a master of your unspoken word? Is that right?
I don't know.
You never heard that? Yeah, you're a master of your unspoken word. You're an employee of your spoken word, and you're a slave to your written word.
Ah. Okay. Well, that's who said that?
Well, I heard it from your dad, but I can't remember where the quote is.
Okay. All
But
right.
I butchered the quote. But yeah, it's along that line that your unspoken word is the only thing you're a master of, and then once you write it, you're an absolute slave to it.
Yeah. So you have 3 working CNC mills, right? And then your Akuma you've taken apart.
Yes.
Do you have plans for that?
Well, it depends on the adventures I go down in the next future. My press at home, I need to redo the hydraulic tank for it. You don't know what you don't know, right?
Right.
So the hydraulic tank I did was a 100-pound propane tank that I cut the top off of, and it's a cylinder that sits upright. But with hydraulics in a reservoir, you guys listening here will all know, a lot of you will know and see how foolish I was with doing that kind of system. You really want your tank to be kind of long and horizontal.
Okay.
And you want a baffle in between so that whenever you dump your hydraulics in, you then have time for the bubbles to settle. And so it has unaerated hydraulics that you are drawing from.
So just having the 100, well, I guess would be 30 gallons maybe.
Yep.
Just having the hydraulic fluid is not enough. How the hydraulic fluid gets to the other end is important.
Yep.
Okay.
So you really want that long reservoir. So right now,
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that. But yeah, again, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so depending on how that helps it, if it solves my problem, then
So are you just putting a new tank on?
yeah, actually my old Akuma, it has a it has my coolant tank.
Yeah.
I'm just going to weld a top on it, and that should solve my problem for me.
Okay.
And yeah, that's why it's still sitting out front of the shop instead of on the scrap trailer. But
And what about the rest of it? All the rest of it sitting inside the door?
if the reservoir doesn't help me, then I have contemplated putting a big cylinder on it and turning it into a 100-ton forging press.
Okay.
Or it would make an incredible press, right? Because it's really well built. I could build a frame that comes up and around it. I could put a cylinder on it. In theory, I should be able to still keep my bed, and I could have multiple dies, and I could just move my bed across, whether with that hand crank or hook up that servo motor or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. But if some of the things that I have in my mind might need a bit more tonnage than that, and then if that's the case, then I'll scrap it and just get
One that's big enough.
big enough, yeah.
Yeah, it would be kind of a bummer. So every time I buy a 100-horse tractor, I use it like it's 150 horse. And so if you build the press that you need 100 tons and it's only 80 ton, that's a bad deal.
Yeah, or if I build 100 ton and I need 800 ton.
Oh, that's, well, okay, I do that too, but yeah, how often have you had to stand on the back of a skid steer while I tried to pick something up, right?
Adventures, right?
Yeah. All right. So you've bought a couple of farms. Are you planning on buying more land?
It's a capital game, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And so one thing, your dad, you'd be able to tell the story a lot better, but your dad's had quite the experience with inflation and government coming in and doing terrible things to money.
Yep.
And you know, your dad's a pretty clever man. And one thing he always said is you really should invest in assets. And the way I look at land is that is like a CD. It's not instantly liquidable. It's there. It's always appreciating. But you can't really touch that money that fast.
Right.
But the cows you put on it, they are instantly liquidable. Mm-hmm. And they're more like money in the bank account. So the more land you have, the more liquidable money you have.
Okay.
And so at some point, I'm sure we'll invest into more land. But as of now, any of our extra funds are either going towards what the girls are doing or investing it back into the business and starting the next adventure.
So the business, what tools do you make now? You have 4 tongs, you have a driving hammer, rulers, creaser, punch, drift, pritchel.
Yep.
Is there anything else?
I think that's...
Oh, hot cut.
And hot cut, yeah.
All right.
So a lot of forging tools, the driving hammer, the ruler. These right here, man, these are just the handiest thing ever. I put a lot of thought into these, and they've got some real useful tools to use every day. Well, right. This is, I pretty well have one in my front pocket and all through winter when I have a pocket. Right. That's the worst part about summer is not having a pocket.
Yeah. No, it really is. It's a hassle. So you will have a video, and I don't know if we can link it to this. I'm sure there's a way, but you have a video on how to measure feet with your ruler, and
it's right up your alley.
It is some math.
Yeah, you always, when we start talking about rulers, Dad always looks at me like I've got one singular eye in the center of my head.
All right, so for the record, folks, in 1997, I started making shoes for feet without measuring, and so I would look at a foot, I would decide how much metal I needed, and I'd make the shoe, and I was right 99 out of 100 times. I mean, I barely missed, especially in those days when I was young and strong and, like you are now. But I go to contests and somebody with your skill set that could use a ruler to such a high degree would beat me. Do you want to talk about your measuring system here, or do you want to save it for your video?
We can, but for me, I don't think that I don't use artistic. When I build my shoes, I still do I can build shoes and I can cut and I can do all of that without my ruler.
Right.
But that added comfort and confidence whenever I do it and I say, does that look like it? Yes. Boom. Okay. If my ruler touches it and it's the right length, right width, I know that go is smooth. And I know that I can push my time limit and maybe finish my shoe up a bit more. If I hit my ruler and it's not right, it's like, okay, I need to get to the foot now, immediately, because I'm not right. My eye's off, whatever's wrong. So it just gives me that ability to do that. So,
Okay. Well, what I found after many years of doing that, I'd go to a clinic and they would just want me to measure, just because if I ever measured a foot, it would mess with me, because I'd trim a foot and I'd say in my mind that I need 12 inches.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would measure the foot with whatever method, and the tape would say I need 11 and a half. And then I'd build my shoe and I'm thinking, oh man, I'm sure I need 12. And I'd end up building the shoe that was short because I didn't just build the shoe for the foot.
Mm-hmm.
So when I did measure, after doing all the training I did to learn how to do it without measuring, it really messed my eye up. Or the ruler confused my brain.
Well, that's a skill set that you trained yourself. You were a very fine tool, or finely trained tool on the way that you did things.
Right.
But my argument would be to learn what went wrong. So again, that goes back to the situation. That is a great learning opportunity. For me, that's not a failure. That's an opportunity to see, okay, did I measure to the wrong spot? Like, is what I picture in my mind opposite? Like, what caused me to mismeasure?
What it taught me was how to stretch.
Well, we all know how to do that. I'd still rather be a half-inch big than a eighth-inch shy.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
How about on bar shoe?
Well, we made that work in England, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Yeah. Okay, so now you're 30. You're 34 now.
33, right? 33. Yeah, 33.
You're 33 now. So you decided to start chasing your fellowship, and tell us about that journey.
Man, it was. You always sit back and probably John Nunn and I, when I was in England on one of those trips getting ready for our associate, you always talking about what you would do next, like where are you going with it. And this idea of ground reaction force, that's always been on the forefront of my mind. Actually, I went to a clinic probably when I was 16 down at Emerson's. Grant Moon was doing a clinic and cut out the inside of the shoe and did all this stuff. And it's like, that makes sense, but I never really read anything or seen anything really definitive.
Okay, so let me back up and do just a little bit of background here. So for those that don't know, the fellowship is the highest level of exam, and there is the Worshipful Company of Farriers, been around since 1356. Their modern history starts in 1674. They have a diploma of the Worshipful Company of Farriers, which is the level you have to be at to shoe horses in the United Kingdom. There's an associate of the Worshipful Company of Farriers, which is that's really their high-level working farrier.
Yeah.
That's a guy who has demonstrated the skills and the theoretical knowledge through a written exam and oral exam and other stuff. But then the highest level is the fellowship. And the fellowship, when I took the fellowship in 1998, it really was a lot more theoretical. So I had to make a patent bar for a foot, and that was the whole practical side for me. You have to turn in a shoe display as well, but they've now ramped it up where the fellowship has to shoe a half a horse, much like the associateship. At one time there was down to, so I've been a fellow for, I guess,
97, right?
98. So I've been a fellow for 27 years, and in that time, we've gotten down to a place where there's like only 30 fellows left alive in the world. What is there now, like 50?
I think there's 62. I think I was 62.
Okay. So we've doubled that number in the last decade, really. And I was the second American. Do you know which American you were?
Well, it's, do you count Nigel?
Okay.
Yeah.
So Nigel he's an English. So no, I wouldn't count him because he still passed it through the British system.
Yeah.
So
I don't actually know.
I think you're probably like fifth, maybe
Yeah.
sixth, somewhere around there. But the really cool thing is they have what they call honors. And so if you get your fellowship with honors, you get to put HONS behind your name forevermore. And in the last 6 decades, only 6 people have done that. And Nigel Fennell being one of them. And you got your fellowship with honors. I mean, I don't even know, that's incredible.
So I'm not a real emotional feller. But
No,
yeah.
me neither. I got to be there for the exam. I only got to watch through this narrow window in the door, so I didn't get to see everything. And I had been an examiner with a Worshipful Company, so some of the guys out there examining I'd worked with.
Yeah.
And they were sympathetic to what I was trying to do, but they wouldn't let me let me in there. So I got to watch at an angle, and it was a beautiful job from what I saw. And then your thesis came back at such a high level, and your orals, you must have knocked it out of the park. And they told us that day, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, that was.
So there was probably 5 or 10 minutes. That walk's what, 200 yards?
Yep.
And it took me a good solid 10 minutes to make that walk.
Yeah. No, it was incredible. Yeah. What an achievement.
It was pretty incredible. So, but anyway,
so
part of
now,
that.
The rest of the background we need to lay out is tell people what ground reaction force is. tell them about your thesis.
Okay, so ground reaction force principles. It's the principle is the amount of weight that a horse is standing when he is in a standing position, the amount of weight that his foot is applying to the ground, that is the ground reaction force that is being applied. As speed increases, obviously that amount of force is going to increase. But what can we do as farriers? What are we able to do by changing either the width of the shoe, position of the shoe, any of those things that we can apply? How does that actually affect? And you see, Den Wallace come out with a bunch of shoes, and you've seen the cutting one side out and making one side wide. This is something that's been happening for a long, long time. And it's always something that kind of stood out to me, but can you prove it? And not just prove it, can you prove it in a functional way? So whenever I was trying to pick a thesis, for me, things that stood out, my thesis needed to make sure that it was applicable to everyday shoeing. It needed to be something that when you were done, it changed what you did. It needed to be something that hadn't been proved yet. And obviously, if it could be on live horses, that really brought all of those things together. But the ground reaction force principles really is, if you can take the amount of weight that's being applied to the ground, and that is going to be your ground reaction forces. Now, if you take that weight and divide that weight by the surface area of the shoe, or the surface area on each portion of the shoe, you can change the amount of pounds per square inch or kilograms per square centimeter, depending on if you're reading my thesis or not.
Right.
For me, being an American, pounds per square inch makes a lot of sense.
But you had to change it, right?
Yeah.
The original version is pounds per square inch and what have you. But in order to be published through the Worshipful Company.
And it makes sense because that's kind of the standard, the world standard. It didn't mess with the way that I had to think about things. But yeah, it's kilograms per square centimeter. And, obviously, it's pretty intuitive when you think about it, that if you increase the width one spot, that you're going to have less kilograms per square centimeter. And if you narrow it up, you're going to have more kilograms per square centimeter. But one thought that doesn't happen very much is that if it's just that equation, if you just take the kilograms, or if you just take weight and divide it by the surface area of the shoe, if I had one branch that was really wide and one branch that was very narrow, and I had the same amount of weight being applied to the entirety of that shoe, the wide branch is actually going to bear more weight.
Right.
So in all reality, when we're dealing with medial lateral, my thesis is on medial lateral balance and how that's affected by ground reaction force principles. In reality, each side of the foot is going to bear a certain amount of weight.
Right.
And by changing the surface area, I am changing the amount of weight in comparison to the weight that foot is going to apply on that side.
Yes. Which gives you flotation versus penetration.
Yep.
And then you also did in different surface areas.
So the tests that we did a walk trot. We were using the hoof beat, Workman Black at the time when we bought it, but it was the hoof beat. We were putting it on horses' feet. applied multiple different shoes. For my thesis, I used a control shoe, and it was the way that I did it really made it comparable to each other. So I had a plate, and I had 2 locating holes and 4 tapped holes. It was about an eighth inch thick, and then I would glue that on with hand tabs on the side.
Under the foot.
Onto the foot. And then my shoes had 2 locating pins, and they had 4 holes that had recessed holes so that I could screw that to the bottom. I had one of my shoes was a control shoe. And this was a really important shoe for the thesis because now I have a comparison on that individual horse. I don't think you could have done it where you only compared a control shoe that was either nailed on and into another shoe, but because that shoe was in the exact same location in comparison to all the other test shoes,
right,
and the exact same shoeing protocol, it wasn't like a week in between shoeings.
right.
It wasn't week in between shoeings. The way that foot was balanced, the way that horse was traveling, is going to be testable because of the way we did it.
Right, because the plate's glued on, and you walk the horse, trot the horse, measure the horse, and then you change that lateral extension into a wedge.
Exactly.
And then change that wedge into a, what we call the one with the medial extension on the inside?
Well, we did a lateral add 0.6. So
Okay.
it was added 600 thousandths to the inside web of the outside branch.
Okay.
Said that fast 4 times.
Yeah.
So the important things about the test was I had a control shoe. We did it on a hard surface. We did it on a soft surface. We did it at a walk and a trot. So I had a control shoe. I had a 3-degree lateral wedge. I had a shoe that had 600 thousandths, so almost 3/4 of an inch, or almost 5/8 of an inch, added to the inside edge of the outside branch. Okay. And then I had a lateral extension that had 300 thousandths, so just over 1/4 inch, added to the outside edge of the lateral branch. And those were the main test shoes. By doing it on hard surface, because I could measure that we created a lateral wedge on hard surface with a lateral wedge shoe, and all the other flat shoes, they were comparable to the control. That proved that A, our method of measuring was effective. Right. So we proved that, and B, we showed how much adaptability horses had.
It was incredible.
Yeah, we created 1.5 degrees of wedge usually.
On hard surface with a 3-degree
wedge.
Yeah, so when I was reading your thesis, that's what I was really blown away with. I thought if you put a 3-degree medial to lateral wedge, that you would get a 3-degree wedge as the horse walked on hard surface.
Yep.
But horses absolutely take that and take away from us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Yeah, there was some really big takeaways. The position of the shoe and how that affects ground reaction force principles was also one of the things that really drove home, but we'll get to that. So then when we did the soft surface, the adaptability and ground penetration was also a pretty shocking experience because we put the lateral wedge on and it only created less than 1 degree of wedge.
Right.
Like 0.5 degrees or 0.05 degrees at one point.
I know, it was incredible.
So it created such a minimal amount of wedge that because the 3-degree wedge, and I should mention that 3-degree wedge shoe had the same profile as the control shoe.
Right.
Because of that, it just sank. The wedge just sank and the horse's ability to adapt to that. The lateral extension was by far the most effective, but it had 1 less square inch material on the outside branch than the actual ground reaction force shoe, which had 600 thousandths on the inside edge of the outside branch.
Yeah, that was incredible.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so that drove home that the position of the shoe in comparison to center of rotation, center of rotation is usually only talked about on a dorsal palmar plane, but for this thesis, we were talking medial lateral. There will be a medial lateral axis to the center of rotation.
From your dorsal view, down the center of your coffin joint, that's where your center of rotation is.
Yeah.
And so if you have a lateral extension that is further from that line, you get a lot more than if you have even that much width and it's closer to the line.
Exactly.
So leverage.
More or less.
Leverage was almost more important than mass.
Exactly. So there's this common thing that every farrier gets told you need to fit longer and set the toes back, right? But if we think about how a barefoot horse is moving through ground, he's not going to have anything that's going to cause his heels to penetrate more. So if we look at the data from Emilio's hinds feet.
Okay, so let's talk about Emilio real quick. So you did this thesis with a great friend.
Emilio Giannotti. Oh man, could not have done it without him. The fact that we had the team the fact that we had Rachel, we had, you guys all helping, the fact that we had Emilio's the one that was like, I'm doing this. And so we started talking about it, and it's like, okay, well, let's do this together. And if we hadn't had the team, it wouldn't have happened.
Yep. Yeah, you had Ray and Abby.
Ray and Abby, which
and
have
then
been,
your wife willing to ride those horses in the cold.
it's so cold. Yeah, you look at the photo in the thesis, and she's dressed like the Abominable Snowman.
Yeah.
And that was a variable my wife as well we took out of it, is we made sure that it was the same rider, try and travel the same speed,
Same tack
same tack, all of the things.
with 10 different horses
With 10 different horses.
in the same place in virtually the same time. Like you
Yeah.
didn't do 3 one day, 3 the next day, 3 the next day. She did all that. And so Emilio did his on hind feet.
Yep.
And his was Eurobar, the
Suspensory shoe.
shoe, and a control shoe, right? Okay. All right. So I didn't mean to interrupt you,
You're
but
good. Yeah, but his on his hind data, when hind feet land, they really land and then they sink a lot plantarly, and then they rotate forward. Well, if you think about what we do when we nail on a shoe with 3/4 of an inch width, that's going to allow for the back half of that foot to penetrate more than a barefoot foot would. So once we apply a shoe, anecdotally they've had success. They've had horses where they feel like they perform better if you fit them a little bigger. Otherwise, vets wouldn't continue to ask us to fit bigger and fit bigger and fit bigger. But what you do when you fit bigger is you change the center of the shoe in comparison to center of rotation. So yes, I can now understand their perspective. By fitting bigger, they are causing the ground reaction force principles. It's not support. The support thing never made a lot of sense to me.
Right.
But in motion, by fitting bigger, changing center of shoe, center of rotation, now that I am a big proponent to call a spade a spade. So if there's a thing that you believe in, great, figure out why, right? So I can appreciate why they want to fit a little bit bigger, but I don't know that I agree that it's necessarily for support as much as the success they have in the ground reaction force principles.
all right. Well, and then also, can you talk about the dynamics of the soil particles?
Oh yeah.
That was another interesting thing. So whenever the foot is penetrating at speed,
Yeah, as you increase velocity, the granular flow dynamics changes the effectiveness.
right?
And so if you think about, if you have a bowl of water or a pool and you come in and you push your hand through it, allows your hand to sink through it. It's that cornstarch and water that when you punch it, it can't move, right? So what that is as the granules are stacked on top of each other, if I push slowly, they have a chance to move, right? But if I come in and I try to shove them, they don't have time to move past each other. So by increasing moving to a trot, and made that shoe more effective than at a walk. But that makes sense as well, because now those granules have that higher velocity when they hit, so they're gonna have more of that resistance. And if we increase that resistance by increasing the width of the shoe on that, that's going to create the more effectiveness.
Yeah. What an incredible thing that I had never thought of.
Yeah.
You know, because we have to shoe a horse static, right? He can't be running while we shoeing him, and most of the balance we're looking at is static. And so you think about a horse walking, and you would say, well, lateral extension in soft soil, you're going to get this reaction. But then you don't realize if you have them at a trot or a run, or if you have a 200-pound man versus a 50-pound little girl, you're going to get some big differences based on that granular flow.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I thought that was a huge takeaway that I had never even thought of in that equation.
And on that statement, you know, through my shoeing career, one of my big jumps in my skill set was probably, you know, making the team. When
Right.
you make a team and you're competing and you're practicing with those guys, through those years of doing that, that was a really important part of my skill set, learning to fit, forage, all of those things. But probably the largest jump in the way that I shoe horses has been in the last year.
Oh, really? From that study?
Well, not necessarily just that study, but just getting ready for my fellowship.
Ah,
And I started doing slow-mo videos of horses moving. So you're talking about you gotta shoe them for when they're dynamic and they're moving. And I've shot a ton, I don't know how many slow-mo videos in the last year. And it's absolutely changed the way I balance feet, and I look at it a lot different. I'm putting more lateral extensions on front feet than I ever have. You know.
okay.
So just yesterday, horses we shod, we did 4 horses at one stop. 2 of them had side bones. One had the equilibrium toe on the side bone. Another one had a lateral extension. The other 2 had lateral extensions on the front feet. So
you're playing a lot of mechanics to your shoeing now.
almost, it seems like every horse is getting some form of something.
Well, and while you're doing this, you're also making a YouTube channel out of it, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of cool. If you guys haven't seen Cody Gregory LLC on YouTube, man, you got to check it out. And you've got a person hired that's actually putting this all together. Like it's
Yeah, Caroline, she's got a great personality. Like you can,
she does.
for someone to do that, they've got to have a really good humor, and they want to be invested. They want to know what you're doing. They want to be learning.
Right. Yeah, she's not filming a show about something she's not interested in. She's already a farrier. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so the idea for the YouTube channel is that I want to sprinkle it with enough education, but at the same time, I want people to enjoy what they're watching too.
Of course. So, what would you say is the path for somebody that wants to become a fellow? How would you, if you were going to coach a person that just got their journeyman, they're 30 years old, and they're looking at pursuing their next thing?
So no matter, I've done a lot of things, right? Like
You've done a lot.
I've competed internationally. I've been on, WCB team, the AFT. I've done that thing. I went and become a pilot. I've chased my associate. I've chased my fellowship. I've studied a lot on anatomy. I've studied a lot on metallurgy. I have, for me, the biggest thing is goal setting.
Okay.
And it's something I see people struggle a lot with. But goal setting, so going back to like, the question was, what would be the thing to get someone to fellowship? But the more important is a more base personal, what is important in your life? Like, how do you make time to do things, right? Like you can say, well, you need to practice 6 hours a day, but if people don't have the entirety of their life together, they'll never be able to do those things. So for me, I need to have a bit of balance, right? So I know that for me to be happy, there's some main things. Obviously, Christ, that you watch people that are kind of floundering, and you just see that there's this hole. They're missing a thing. I feel that a lot of times that's filled. And also, we're talking about that belief that you can succeed in anything, and like that no backup when you have a problem. The only thing is forward. That kind of personality, I think, also comes from my faith, right? I believe that I have this inner peace that allows me to just keep moving forward. It allows me to know that everything's okay, and I might be able to take a little bit bigger risk because, well, things are going to be okay.
It's already handled.
That's already handled. So you have that. I know that I need to be outside. I need to be physically tired, mentally challenged. Like I need to be, at the end of the day, my brain needs to be tired. I need to do physical work. And there's all sorts of people going to the gym. And I think that you were talking about how I raise my kids. It's that end goal in mind, right? That a lot of people by happenstance find happiness. We have a client that's number 2 on a patent for the lithium batteries that are in our phones, right? And hasn't sat in an office in 10 years.
Right.
Like he has chosen to live a lifestyle of being around horses, working outside. He doesn't even have a tractor that he can feed hay with. So it's blizzarding right now, and he's hooking up to go feed hay.
Right.
So what about that? Like, how did he by happenstance come across that? Mm-hmm. And Outliers is a guy that ends up being a bouncer for his entire career, but he's the guy that wrote the main, he's like a massive physicist, right?
So Outliers is a book by Malcolm Gladwell. Another great read.
Yeah.
If you haven't read it.
So I know I have to be physically tired, mentally challenged. If I can work with horses or work with animals, be outside, and I have to have a pretty large goal in front of me. Now, setting a goal is a thing that I see a lot of people that kind of say they want to do something, but then they say they don't have time to do it. So the full Gregory, once you set a goal, you attack it with all your might. I think when you're setting goals, it's easy to sit back and say, I would kind of like to do this, and I'd kind of like to do that. Unless you convince yourself it's a worthy enough cause to chase, you won't chase it.
Right.
So whether that's you think it's going to financially benefit you, it's going to be. But if you don't have the rest of that equation when you're starting to set that, you might get to that by happenstance. But to me, those are factors in an equation when you're trying to set your life up for a goal like that you have to account for. But if I was getting done with my journey when I was going to work towards that, I do think you need to compete just a little bit.
Okay.
You don't need to compete heavily, but like Emilio's going through this and he hasn't really competed. and he's doing amazing at it.
He's a fantastic shoer,
Great.
but not under the clock with the judges watching you like you do in a contest.
I think there's a skill set to that I would pick a certain number of contests that I hit, and I would compete at and go do that thing. Dissections. The more dissections a person could do in full horse dissections, that's understand why the animal that feeds us, that we love, that put us here, understand why and how he moves. Like, that answers so many questions when you're looking at how a horse is moving and you're trying to benefit him. Those would be huge steps. System of Grossman by Getty, that book for my anatomy helped me more than just about any book.
That's an old book too.
Yeah. So I can't remember Sisson or Grossman. So if you guys have ever been to a full horse dissection, when I do a full horse dissection, I do it in that standing position.
Right.
And it was either Sisson or Grossman. I can't remember. He's the one that kind of really revolutionized that in the vet schools.
Okay.
And so Getty was one of their apprentices, and he edited their book after they were not able to do it no more.
You remember what year that was?
I think 60s maybe.
Okay, so that recent.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it was like 1918, but it's
No.
It's more recent than that. Okay. Yeah. All right, cool.
And just slow-mo videos of horses. Start looking why would you put a side bone on a horse? Why would you, do you need to bump the inside heel on a side bone shoe? Is that the right spot for it? Why is it that when you balance a horse till they land flat, are they looking more pigeon-toed? How do you fit a lateral extension in that situation? How do you apply the mechanics to a shoe that improves that horse? Those would be all questions. And I would just ask why. Why would be the most important thing. It would be understand why you're doing the things you do, and that'll allow you to really succeed at this exam.
Okay. And what about, so you talked about Sisson and Grossman. Do you have other recommended reading?
So a question I love to ask is three books that everybody needs to read. And I kind of leave it open-ended, but you have three books everybody needs to read, either for enjoyment, to get them into reading. You have three books that...
They won't affect us.
Okay.
Or Cameron is feeding cattle.
Yeah. So three books that every person needs to read to improve them as a person, right? And so for me, obviously the Bible. I don't necessarily count that one because I consider it a prerequisite. Everyone should be reading that, right?
Okay.
So Abolition Man by C.S. Lewis. I know that was one of your favorite books.
Oh, yeah. It's not a long book, but it's a deep one.
Yeah, you and I have a tremendously different reading list enjoyment. Yeah, so from that peak, that ability to know that your brain is malleable, you can do as you wish with it. That's a really important book on my list. Malcolm Gladwell books are always up there. The Mental Edge, like, you can start really playing into a list of books, but those two for sure would be required reading.
All right. Excellent. And so what are you reading right now?
I'm reading The Toyota Way, and it's probably going to make that third book.
Oh, it is?
So throughout the last year, I've been putting a lot of lean practices into my life. And it's become kind of systemic. Like, it's just everything around me has to have those things. And so if you ever look at my nail drawer, everything is in this, the lean manufacturing. That Toyota book really describes how to organize and remove a lot of stress. And so you have a finite number of decisions you can make in a day.
Right.
And a book called When talks about this, like WHEN, right? So if you need to make any decisions, you need to make them before noon. So it makes a really good argument.
The older you get, the more important that is, by the way.
Yeah.
You start doing your banking at 4 o'clock whenever you're in your 50s. It's a lot tougher than doing it at 2 or 3 in the morning.
And it even not your ability to do something, but you default back to you won't use cognitive reasoning after lunch.
Okay.
So you'll just default to your kind of knee-jerk reaction. So, like, I can't remember if it was a book or by Malcolm Gladwell, that one, but it talks about your chances of getting paroled.
Right.
Afternoon.
Yep.
It's.
Yes. No, it went way down.
Yeah. Just because they defaulted back to that. And
what book was that?
It could have been, I thought it was When, but it could have been Talking to Strangers.
It was Talking to Strangers.
Yeah.
I believe
that book. That book I really enjoyed.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's on the
When was that written by Malcolm Gladwell?
no.
Okay, all right.
I can't remember. It's one Brian Mullins recommended to me,
Okay, I haven't read that one.
but it advocates for a cup of coffee and a 20-minute nap,
All right.
and it allows you to have cognitive reasoning for the second half of the day with that, which is something your dad's done for years.
Yeah, decades.
Yeah, and but yeah, so you have a finite number of decisions. So if you can remove a certain number of those decisions, like do I need to put nails in my truck? Well, make it simple. Have a box that when it's empty, it sits there open, and you open your drawer and you refill that box. Have your boxes so that they're clearly labeled. Have your nail boxes. I designed a nail box that has eliminated all of that for me. It's so simple. It's so like elementary. It's so nice.
So you're taking those decisions away from you.
Yeah.
And made it easier.
Yeah. And it's that Kanban system where like when something runs out, Kanban means that it tells you to go do a task more or less. So let's say in this situation, I've got, you could put a card there, but my Kanban is just an empty box that says I need to fill that. So I'd go back to my nail pile and I'd have, let's say I had a case. When I get down to 2 boxes, there's going to be a card that sits there that says you need to order cards from this, you need to order nails from this location at this time and quantity. So it's not like, do I need to order a case or 3 boxes, or it's all of that's pre-decided. And
Very
so
cool.
you buy your case, you take out 2 boxes, you tape it together, whatever, and then whenever you get down to those 2 boxes, the 2 boxes are enough time for you to get your nails in. So it eliminates all that kind of, it's a really cool system. So like if you walk in my machine shop right now, everything's organized, everything has a place.
Yeah, it's really had a transformation in the last 6 months.
Yeah, and that's big part of that was Ray was attacking that with her weight. But it's that sweep, sort, standardize. It's the 3 S's that Pearson Workholding talks about.
What was it again?
Sweep, sort, and standardize.
Okay.
So like when he walks in his shop, he runs the pallets that I use in my machine. And that's kind of where I started this journey, was his YouTube channel and his podcast and going down that. But it's when you walk in, you sweep and you sort anything that's not, put it away. And if it doesn't have a home, you standardize it and make it a home. And you make it, don't do jobs twice. Right? That is infuriating to do jobs twice. Pick up a wrench and, where do I put it? I'm going to think about that. Well, why not make a home for it today so that tomorrow I can pick it up and put it back in its home?
You don't have to worry about that decision.
Don't have to worry about that decision. And you don't have that frustration of what I'm going to do with this, or it's just sorted.
Huh. Well, that sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
So the Toyota way, they're the ones that kind of came up with that?
Their biggest thing is not lean practices, it's the culture that you build in your life. And they're building it in their shop. And so they're very much, and again, it's going off of this book, right?
So is it a Japanese oriented thing?
Well, it is the Japanese, that's the way they do their manufacturing.
So do they talk about doing calisthenics with your employees and stuff like that?
No.
Okay.
No, it's more about their culture as in like high quality, make sure that every employee, instead of putting in equipment, they would rather hire an employee and teach them to be skilled, because now you have a person that can do quality control. And you drive home that quality is the most important thing. So they look at their quality, and each person is driving for quality, not quantity.
Okay.
But in the end, they end up with quantity.
Right.
Because, and everyone is their own engineer. So if they have a problem, they'll stop the whole assembly line, and everyone will attack it with the weight of the whole company and fix whatever problem they're having in now. And so they do one piece workflow. So if anything, they'll work through it. And if anything's broke, they'll know, instead of building 100 of a thing, and then when you're done, you have 100 bad parts, as soon as the first one's bad, they can stop the thing and fix it immediately.
So has it changed the way you machine now a little bit?
It has sped us up so much just by some of these practices.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you guys have taken over the manufacture of my knives, and I'm so happy. I mean, the quality of the hoof knife, I feel, is really, really nice.
Yeah. Well, we're doing our best. That's American made, right? Like
American
that's
made.
the American made. It's not just being made in America. It's being made with that pride of being in America. It's that belief that we do it well. You know, you want to buy American-made tools because they're built better and stronger and are higher quality. That passion for what you do is why American-made is what it is.
Yeah.
You know, we could cut corners and still be American-made and not follow that mission statement. But that's the mission statement of American-made. And I think, you know, there's a lot of people who are still doing the American-made, but not with that mission statement.
Right.
You have to have that pride that American-made means higher quality.
Yes. Yeah. Well, pretty interesting. Very, very neat stuff. All right. So, what other books you reading? Is that the only one you got going right now?
I'm reading a book about the Transcontinental Railroad.
Oh yeah. How's it?
It's
okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
The Frontiersman that I'm reading, that Mel Gibson suggested, Joe Rogan. Man, that book is
Captivating?
Really recommend. Yeah. And then The Heart of the Sea is the other book I'm reading, which is the book that inspired the Essex. It was a whaling ship out in Nantucket.
Okay,
that inspired Moby Dick. So I'm reading one on another device. You know, I got two different devices, so I don't have the hard copies. I'm sorry. And it's also excellent. And it would be really, really good if I weren't reading The Frontiersman at the same time. So
yeah, I need a novel. My favorite way of reading is to read my Bible, and then read an intellectual book, and then read a novel.
So is that what you do every morning?
I try to. Right now, I don't have a novel. I don't have anything. It's just been like, I started that Transcontinental Railroad, and that's supposed to be my novel right now, but it's a little too
technical.
Yeah, it's just not. It's not.
It's not written in novel form.
Yeah.
So I read my Bible every morning, but that's usually about all the reading. I'm reading another one, Why Grace Changes Everything by Chuck Smith.
Okay.
And so it goes with my Bible reading. But in the morning is usually that kind of reading. And then later in the day, if I have a chance to read, or at night is when I read my other books.
I don't spend very much of my life that I don't have somebody actively with me.
Yes. Well, that's why it takes me so long to get through a podcast.
Yeah.
If I am trying to listen to a podcast, especially a long one, I may be 10 days to get through a 2-hour podcast.
Yeah.
I always ask my guests to teach me something. Did you come prepared?
I mean,
well, what did you have in mind for teaching?
Well, you wanted me to talk about my measurement system for wedges. That was the one that you said, oh yeah, you did a video with a lot of math. That was great. I'm glad you did that. So, you can't see, but I'm doing air quotations for my dad in the air right now.
You can see.
Yeah.
Well, unless you listen to it on an audio platform. Okay, so how do you measure for wedges?
Yeah. So for me, the idea, so why is a nautical mile a nautical mile?
I don't know.
So there are 180 latitudinal lines, right?
Right.
181 if you count the equator.
Okay.
So you have 90 up to center, 90 up to center. So that's the distance, right? That's what it is. But if you split the distance from the North Pole to the equator and divide that by 90, you'll end up with 60 nautical miles in between each one of those.
A nautical mile is 1.12?
Yeah, 1.15.
1.15 statute miles.
Yep. But that is 1/60th of a latitudinal line.
Then how come we don't have, why do we have statute miles?
Don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
But there's 60 minutes, so each degree, right? Mm-hmm. So that's more or less 1 degree is a latitudinal line. There's 60 minutes inside of that. Each minute is a nautical mile.
Okay.
So 1/60th of a degree is a nautical mile when you're going to the North Pole. So,
all right. So if I'm measuring from my toe to my heel, how many nautical miles?
So the idea is it's the same idea though. If we have a circle, and we can split that up into degrees, right?
Right.
So there's 360 degrees in a circle.
Yes.
So what we need to do is we just need to figure out the size of our circle, split that to 360 degrees, and whatever that distance around our circle is, we can then figure out 1 degree is a certain height.
Okay. Yeah.
So what the equation is, pi is the equation that whatever the diameter of a circle is, if you multiply it by pi, you end up with the circumference. Mm-hmm. That is how pi works. It's used in a lot of different ways, but that's its definition. Right. So if I have, let's say, 5 inches, a 5-inch foot, well, that's only a radius. You need the diameter of that circle.
Okay.
So you do radius times 2 gives you diameter,
which is 10.
Which is 10 times pi.
Okay.
So that'd be your circumference. Then
Okay.
you divide that by 360, and that'll give you what 1 degree of height. That distance is 1 degree over a 5-inch piece.
Okay.
So then you take the distance of this height and this height, whatever that delta, the difference is, and you divide that by whatever 1 degree is, that height, and that gives you the number of degrees that you have created with a wedge when you build a shoe.
Okay. All right. You heard it here. All right. That's excellent.
Yeah.
All right. So what about a dad joke?
Dad joke. I had a friend, he was in a boat, and he fell out of the boat, but he was in Egypt, but absolutely refused to admit that it happened. But he was in denial.
All right. A good Nile joke. Yeah. You don't get a lot of good Nile jokes anymore.
Yeah.
All right. All right. And has there been anything that you want to talk about that we haven't touched on?
No, I think I steered it back to where I wanted it to go.
All right. All right. Cool. And this, I think it's been very good.
Yeah, I covered a lot of ground.
Yeah,
Hopefully, what is your app that you're using
For
editing this? It's not Discord, it's
it's Final Cut Pro and Descript right now.
Descript, yeah. Hopefully Descript can save you a lot of work.
Oh yeah. Well, son, Mom and I are so proud of you. We just love watching your kids grow up and seeing the man you become. And
Yeah, well, thank you guys for all you do. Like the fact that none of this could happen if you hadn't been a big part of the journey.
yeah, but that's what families do, right?
Yeah.
And so there's nothing like watching your offspring do better than you.
Yeah.
And so it's been such a joy to watch that, and I'm so proud of you.
It's been a joy to do it with you. Like the precipice of I don't know, not precipice, but that trip to England, the fact that we all got to go there a week early, the fact that, we did the exam in the same forge you did it in 98, all of that entire journey, the fact we got to do that all together, and all the competing we've got to do together, all of it, it's all been us learning to fly together. There's the number of stories that we could have of things that we've done together is
Been very.
we didn't get to talk about those things in this podcast, but
No, we didn't. No, you want to talk a little bit about pilotage? We should.
yeah.
So why did you learn to fly?
Well, when I was competing a lot, I was tired of driving across the United States. I felt like every month I was doing a 12-hour drive or longer, driving to Sheridan, Wyoming. Or was it Eureka? We drove out there. My wife was 9 months pregnant.
Eureka, Nevada.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a drive.
We drove out there with the students, and she
Yeah.
was very pregnant. She's like, we're stopping now. I'm like, we'll find a hotel. And we couldn't find a hotel for love nor money in the middle of on 80, wherever we were. So, but yeah. And then, like I said, I always have to have a thing in front of me. And so, yeah, I went and took a few hours lessons, bought a plane. And then I said, hey, Dad, there's an incurable disease in this world, and it's flight. Oh, sure. I've heard of it. It's cool. Then, obviously, Worshipful Gregory did too, and now we fly every chance we get.
Yeah.
Not flying today.
No, today you can't see outside, but
Well, you could if you wanted to, but
you can't see outside from our current technology. We have the cameras pointed at us, but there is snow everywhere. And
actually you can't see outside because of the quantity of snow.
yeah, it's pretty incredible. Yep. So we had a pilot friend that rodeoed with you guys, and she was astounded that you would go buy a plane before you got your license, saying, well, what if he doesn't get his license? Did that ever occur to you?
No. Why would it?
That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, you just keep do until just do.
Yeah. Well, that's a big takeaway from this podcast. Just do until you got it done.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for sitting with me.
Yeah, of course.
It's a real blessing. So,
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you.
guys, thank you for watching, and check out Cody Gregory LLC to see his tool line, and you get to use some incredible tools by doing that. So,
And my apologies for stealing this much of your life that you'll never get back.
we've been talking about Cody Gregory LLC and Cody Gregory tools, and here's just one of them. This is the driving hammer. And if you guys use this thing, it feels like it weighs 2 pounds. You'll look at the nail and you'll say, I don't know how that thing just sunk through that foot like that. Anyway, Everything that this young man makes is the highest quality. I don't know if it's geometry, I don't know if it's physics, I don't know if it is heat treating. I don't know, but his tools are among the best in the world. So if you want to be one of the best in the world, check out Cody Gregory LLC and get started by having some great tools.